We are exactly 1 year removed from the brutal rape and murder of 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungaray. Her killing fueled a nationwide rallying call and outrage centered around illegal immigration and a lot of questions surrounding bond reform as well. It also sparked efforts to ensure that a death like this never happens again, and this cannot be taken in vain. We're going to start now with a look back. June 16th, 2024. At 12 years old, Jocelyn Nungaray sneaks out of her home in North Houston. She encounters two men, Johan Jose Martinez Rangel and Franklin Jose Peña Ramos, outside of a restaurant, and they walk to a gas station together. The men later admit that hours later, they assaulted and strangled her under a bridge. June 17th. Jocelyn's body is discovered in a bayou near her home early in the morning. June 20th. Martinez Rangel and Peña Ramos are arrested and charged with capital murder. June 23rd and 24th, court proceedings begin. Bond is set at $10 million for Peña. Both suspects admit involvement in the crime. July 11th, Nungaray's mother testified to Congress calling on lawmakers to secure the border and to pass the Justice for Jocelyn Act. The act, backed by Senator Ted Cruz, would keep detained immigrants in custody while their cases are proceeding. In September, the suspects are charged with kidnapping and aggravated sexual assault. December 13th, Harris County DA Kim Ogg files notice to seek the death penalty for both defendants. May 13th, 2025, Texas officials propose Jocelyn's Law and Justice for Jocelyn Act to address bail and immigration issues. Just a sad, sad story all around. And Fox 26's Jonathan Mejia was really instrumental in working closely with Jocelyn's family, specifically her mother here, Alexis, just reflecting on the tragedy of what has been. Just give us an update on how the family is doing and Alexis and all that.
Yeah, no, it's a year since this happened, and it's a tragedy for all those involved. But Alexis has always shown strength, and she says she gets that strength from her faith. She tells me she'll never stop fighting for her daughter. She gave us a really exclusive inside access as to what Jocelyn's world was like inside her bedroom. I got to speak to her at a storage where she redecorated that storage as her daughter's room was. And in there, she shares about her mental health struggle. She shares about the struggle she had parenting Jocelyn, the 12-year-old. And it's a really moving interview, and I want you guys to take a look at that.
June 17th, 2024, a date that Alexis Nungaray and her family will never forget. That day, their lives would change forever as 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungaray was sexually assaulted, tied down, strangled to death, then thrown into a creek in North Houston.
I feel like a lot has happened in this year. The first couple months were a blur. Was really just trying to get through the emotions of what grief looks like, what it feels like, and the first couple months really were my hardest, just because I've never lost anybody.
They say time heals all wounds, but this one just cut too deep. And while some days are better than others, Alexis never forgets her daughter and is fueled by her spirit to continue to fight for justice.
She was my first loss. And it being my child, it kind of hit me differently, and anyone that would be expected to lose a child in that aspect and that way. But I've decided to use my pain and turn it into my power and be her voice and speak highly of who she was and the child and young lady she was turning into.
Alexis was 14 years old when she found out she was pregnant with Jocelyn. Even though she was young, she was determined to fight for her unborn child. In a scrapbook that she never got to finish, she would write letters to her daughter. In one of the letters, she wrote how great her daughter would be and the impact she would have on the world. But she never imagined that 12 years later, Jocelyn would leave a lasting impact, not because of the life she led, but because of her untimely death and those who caused it.
Well, I always fought for her, for sure. Being a teen mom wasn't something ideal. No one really wants to have that in the family. So I was really 14 when I was pregnant with her, and it was was kind of hard on my family. I had to fight to keep her. You know, my mom would try to give me other options, you know, abortion or adoption.
Alexis had just turned 15 and 2 days after Christmas, Jocelyn was born. She recalls how quickly she had to mature, missed out on parties, she focused on finishing school, having a greater sense of purpose in life, now that she had someone looking up to her.
She was everything that you could think of as a good baby. She was very well behaved, very quiet, didn't give me a hard time, wasn't a big crier in the middle of the night. She, as a toddler, as a young little girl, before grade school, she was very self-sufficient. She was always fine with just playing with her Barbie dolls and her babies and coloring or reading or watching her shows.
And how did you see her change? Like everyone, you know, we go through different stages in life, but as she grew from, you know, baby to an adolescent to a teenager, how did that change? How did you guys' relationship change?
When she was super little, she's very girly. She let me do different hairstyles on her. And then when she hit elementary school, she was still a little girly, but not really. And she was still a kid overall, though. She still liked playing with her toys, still liked watching cartoons. And then when it was time for her to get older, probably right before she hit puberty, is when I started noticing a difference.
That difference included no longer wanting to wear girly clothes or letting Alexis do her hair.
Just like a whisper.
She kind of became her own being, was finding her own way, and was figuring out her style at the same time. She would wear, you know, regular bootcut jeans with like a kind of a crop shirt, and then she went to the very baggy cut-off cargo jeans and cut-off shirts and Converse all the time.
Alexis says she came into her own, and that's when she knew her daughter would be special.
In the apartment we lived in, when we moved to, wasn't the greatest area, and I did always express to her, never walk out by yourself, never walk down the street. Even though the corner store, you can walk to the gate of the apartment, you can see the see a gas station nearby right there. Still don't go there, like it doesn't matter.
Alexis was strict with Jocelyn because she wanted better for her. She didn't want her daughter to go through what she did. Alexis described Jocelyn as mischievous and a poker-faced liar. So when Alexis put her children to sleep, as both Jocelyn and her younger brother shared a room, she never imagined that the next morning, her daughter would turn up missing, and the reports of a dead body near her apartment complex would end up being Jocelyn.
The strength is honestly through my faith, really. If her brother had never got me to go back to church a few months before everything happened, when he did, I don't really know where I would be at mentally. I thank God every day for allowing me to come closer to him and allow him in my heart, because his strength is really what's gotten me through all of it.
A year later, Alexis has recreated her kid's bedroom in a storage unit. The room is identical to how it was. The crooked posters her daughter swore were hanging straight, a blue bag of Takis on her bed, her desk, guitar, skateboard, and her beloved record player.
Indefinitely.
And how special is this room for you?
I ideally didn't want to box her stuff away, because I felt like boxing her stuff away was going to be boxing her away and leaving her in the past and her catching dust, and I just didn't want to do that. I couldn't let go of her. Her room was her safe space. Her room was her, and I just couldn't take it upon myself to leave her things in boxes. So I took pictures of every inch of her room, down to the bookshelf of the way she had her books labeled, to her little weird shrine she has on top of her bookshelf.
Hi, Alexis. It's Donald Trump.
Jocelyn's death made national headlines, even capturing the president's attention. Not only because of the disturbing nature, but also because 2 undocumented immigrants from Venezuela admittedly committed the crime.
It didn't feel forced. I felt the empathy coming from him. I know he's a father himself, and he showed me that he cared. He showed me that she mattered, and he was even more apologetic, just knowing that her death was preventable. Her death should have never happened. She should have never encountered the two individuals that she encountered that night.
And as Alexis and her family prepare for the capital murder trial of the two men, she's very clear about what she wants: justice and the death penalty.
They get to sleep. They get to interact with people. They get to talk to their family. They get to be alive. And Jocelyn is not. And it becomes very upsetting to know that they're here and she's not. But I do pray in my heart that they have remorse for what they did. I hope she replays in their head over and over and over, because she was special, and I just want the justice that she deserves, which is why I speak as much as I can right now. It's not about the way they took her life. It's about a 12-year-old girl who had dreams bigger than herself, and I'm just here to try to make her dreams possible as much as I can.
And you heard her there, Anthony. She said it. She's speaking out now because she can. Because once the trial starts, she's under a strict gag order and she will no longer be able to speak to media. And also it's about her ongoing fight for her daughter and raising awareness as to what's going on, but also fighting for justice.
You know, it really took my breath away was seeing her basically recreate Jocelyn's room in that storage unit.
It gave me chills. I walked in and I was just like, wow. I mean, I grew close to the family because I covered it from day one. And, it gave me, that sense of like, wow, like.
It's powerful.
It's powerful. It was a powerful moment.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much for your coverage on that. We'll get back to Jonathan here in just a second. But one of the people that was lock and step with the Nungaray family was April Aguirre, and her family has gone through their own tragedy here. But she got a chance to sit down with our Greg Grugan, our political reporter here, to give us some more insight into the fight for Jocelyn.
April Aguirre, you've been at the tip of the spear in terms of leading the crusade for bond reform. You have heard many sad stories. You have witnessed tragedies, even your own families. But how did the murder of Jocelyn Nungaray change the landscape in this argument?
You know, at the time when Jocelyn Nungaray was killed last summer, when we got that phone call, there was a child found in the bayou, tragically deceased and also beaten, bruised. We could not fathom the evil that had occurred that night. And the whole city of Houston came together because it's never going to be normal to have our children raped, tortured, and murdered. Jocelyn Nungaray's tragedy changed our landscape on a national level because none of us want that to be our child. She was not safe walking a mile from her home to a corner store. She was not safe. Two individuals that had not ever seen her, had not ever met her, decided from a split second that they were going to torture her, murder her, and rape her under a bayou. This child suffered immensely, and that resonated with parents across the nation because we would not want that to be our children. I remember growing up, I used to come out of the house without my parents knowing all the time, but I was in a safer environment. We failed Jocelyn Nungaray, and parents across the nation knew that there was monsters just like those two individuals that were here illegally that had never been vetted in our country and could be our neighbors. People became afraid.
You survived the loss of your niece, Arlene Alvarez, and it's got to take a toll on you when you go and advocate, you comfort these families. How was this different? Because you found yourself on a national level making connections with the Trump campaign and President Trump. What can you tell us about that process?
This was very different from Arlene's murder. Arlene was shot in a case of mistaken identity. Arlene was not tortured. Arlene was not raped. But since Arlene passed away, we have decided that we were going to stand up and help other parents because we were so lost initially when Arlene was killed. We didn't know how to navigate the criminal justice system, and we didn't want that for future crime victims, specifically parents of murdered children. There's hundreds of murders here in Houston, but we focus on the murders of children. This is how we got next to the Jocelyn Nungaray family, and we started helping them. We started ensuring that they were going to get justice, because at the time we had two fugitives that I like to call ghosts. People that had only been here a couple of weeks in our city committed this. That is a very difficult individual to track. No IDs, no credit cards, no driver's license, no license plate. They were walking. How do you identify a ghost that has only been in the community 3 weeks? So we've come along and we've stood next to the parents of murdered children. And I remember having that conversation with Jocelyn's mom, and I said, listen, you have two fugitives out there. Either we take this story and we share it with everybody, or we go home and stay quiet and grieve. But regardless, I can't give you back your little girl. But I can try to help you and guide you to ensure that the individuals that committed this heinous act are held responsible and accountable for their atrocious acts.
Jocelyn's legacy, did you feel it at the state capitol? Did you feel it in Washington, D.C.? Has she changed the way Americans look at their communities and those who have been allowed to come into their communities?
Absolutely. So Jocelyn Nungaray's story put this front and center for the whole nation to see that it could absolutely happen to anybody. Because if this child wasn't safe walking under a mile to a corner store before an individual so callously decides in a split second that they're willing to rape, torture, and murder her, is absolutely terrifying for any parent. And I want to say the bravery of the family to come forward initially to ensure that these individuals were held responsible and apprehended, but secondly, to bring their story and share it with the nation so that everybody knows that it could happen to absolutely anybody. Anybody, it could happen, because we were allowing monsters into our communities. My mother and father were born and raised in Mexico. I want you to know that this is not uncommon in third world countries. This is not uncommon in Mexico. This is not uncommon in Venezuela, Honduras, South America. It's not. Missing little girls, raped and murdered little girls, is just a common Wednesday morning. It's not unusual. And the numbers that are available through public data of murdered and missing children are very skewed. They're very underreported. The actual numbers are staggering, but the numbers as they are very terrifying. There's a word called femicidio. In English, it's called femicide. That's just the act of being murdered because you're a woman or a girl. It's not uncommon in our countries. But my parents, like Jocelyn Nungaray's grandparents, came to this country to get away from that type of violence. And here in this nation, we want to respect our girls. We want to see them grow old. We want to see them perish from natural causes. We cannot imagine what Jocelyn endured that night that ultimately led to her death. But everybody in the nation made a decision when they voted for a president that was not going to continue to allow this.
And we told you earlier about Jocelyn's Law, Senate Resolution 1. Well, that would have created a constitutional amendment to prevent bail for undocumented immigrants who are in the country illegally. But unfortunately, it fell short of the votes necessary. Jonathan Mejia is back joining us. And Jonathan, you spoke with Paul Castro of the Texas Crime Victims United about what he thinks will be next for this bill and also why it fell short to get the votes.
Yeah, Paul Castro has been very close to Alexis Nungaray and the Nungaray family in this case in general. And to speak with him, he tells me that it failed by little. It didn't fail by much, and he expects that they will be able to reintroduce it and has hope that he'll be able to see Jocelyn Law be signed into law.
I think, and it only failed by a few votes. So this was a lot closer than I think a lot of people predicted. Jocelyn's Law, which would require judges to deny bail to people who are not here legally, who've committed a felony. The whole reason behind that is to keep dangerous people who could skip out of town and leave and never face consequences for their behavior, keep them here under arrest so that we can, put them and prosecute them. I think that failed because there were a handful of people who thought that might deny those people due process. The other part of that, there is a constitutional requirement where we as victims have the right to see our day in court as well. And people who skip bail at high percentages need to be held in place so that we don't lose track of them and have them leave the country and never face the consequences for their behavior. So I think some people just got afraid, and unfortunately, they voted against it. The governor is contemplating whether or not to hold a special session. There doesn't seem to be an appetite for that. And so right now, the question has to be on the minds of voters. Is this an important enough decision that I'm going to stand behind a person who's going to unseat the person who voted against this? So there are a handful of Harris County Democrats that many of whom have been supportive in other areas. And if this is a situation, an issue that is important to them, they're going to have to make a decision. This is going to be especially true in the primary, but a lot of these seats are purple, so there's a strong possibility that they could get knocked out if it were in a contested general election. I think it's important to our community. I know there are some friends of mine who have issue with it. I respect their concern. At the same time, the concern I have is that in a situation like Jocelyn's situation, it's very possible for a person who's a violent and possibly repeat offender to get out on a bail. And if that happens, to escape consequences, leave the country, and essentially not be found, not be extradited back here, and never face the consequences, and the victim never see justice.
When we return to our Jocelyn Nungaray Forever 12 special, we take a look at her alleged accusers and the prosecution in this case and the legal details never shared before. And only on Fox, we revealed some new evidence in the case against one of the men accused of murdering Jocelyn Nungaray. Fox 26's Abigail Dye got an exclusive one-on-one interview with Kim Ogg, the former DA who went for the death penalty. Listen to what she had to say here.
So you're saying this isn't the first time that Pena has been accused of rape?
That's correct.
To just know that this happened to another woman, it hurts my heart. Really, a piece of me shatters a little bit.
June 2024, 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungaray's body was found in a bayou on West Rankin Road. Two undocumented Venezuelan nationals, Johan Jose Martinez Rangel and Franklin Jose Peña Ramos, are charged with capital murder, accused of sexually assaulting, then killing Jocelyn. Kim Ogg was the Harris County District Attorney at the time. Her office gathered the evidence they needed to seek the death penalty in the case. And now, she's revealing a key piece that helps secure that option.
What we learned during the course of the investigation was that one of the suspects, Pena, had been involved in a prior sexual assault.
She says a victim from another state was attacked while on vacation before Jocelyn's killing.
It happened in Costa Rica. It happened to an American citizen who came forward with that information after their pictures were shown on national television.
I'm very glad that this young woman had the courage to come forward.
That evidence specifically helped you make this determination for seeking death?
I believe it helped the entire committee make the determination.
Was this information that you had ever known, or is this new to you too?
This is definitely news to me. I always felt in my heart that this was never their first time, especially Pena.
Why are you sharing this now?
Because I am very concerned about the decisions that my successor district attorney has been making. When she reported it to the authorities in Costa Rica, they did nothing. And so imagine the frustration of that individual. I do not want that to be swept under the carpet. I think it's important for the public to get the final say. Do they deserve death for the rape and murder of Jocelyn, or should they spend their life in the penitentiary? What I don't want is some backdoor deal done in the quiet of the night and a long time from now, once people have forgotten the horror of this case.
I see this as a reoffender scenario, and because he wasn't held accountable for his actions when he did this to this other young woman, he should be held accountable for this young child whose life was taken.
And there's much pain and heartbreak associated with this story. Believe it or not, for those closest to Jocelyn Nungaray and her family, there's some comfort there as well. And it comes in the form of a wildlife refuge. In January, as he addressed the joint session of Congress, President Trump presented an executive order renaming the Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge to honor Jocelyn Nungaray.
One thing I have learned about Jocelyn is that she loved animals so much. She loved nature. Across Galveston Bay, from where Jocelyn lived in Houston, you will find a magnificent national wildlife refuge. Alexis, moments ago, I formally renamed that refuge in loving memory of your beautiful daughter, Jocelyn.
The refuge is located east of Galveston, just south of Winnie in Chambers County. A month after the order was signed, the wildlife refuge was officially renamed.
Just knowing that she's being dedicated at a place that was one of her absolute dreams, to have every animal have somewhere safe to go, have a home. It's very bittersweet. It's very, very powerful to know that I've helped make a difference for her, and I was able to accomplish her dreams for her.
It didn't matter whether it was a kitten, a pigeon, or anything, whether she was in a house, an apartment, it didn't matter. She just needed a home for an animal, so she had a great love for animals.
And in May, Senator John Cornyn made sure the renaming remains permanent, celebrating unanimous passage of the Jocelyn Nungaray National Wildlife Refuge Act,
which would permanently rename the Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge in Texas in her memory.
And we have so much more coverage of Jocelyn Nungaray and her tragic murder here. Also more interview sound from her mother, Alexis. You can find that and more on our app, our free app, Fox Local. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Anthony Antoine.